Starting now, you can get a transcript of each week's Rich Dad radio show. Just visit www.richdad.com/radio and download a copy today.
This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Hello. It's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. And today's subject is this. What do you know about taxes? You know, Rich Dad is about financial education. But do they ever teach you about taxes? You know, I mean, most people what they teach you about money is you can have a FICO score, you know, your credit ratings, and you should save money and give it to the stock market. That is not financial education. So everything you do today, I don't care where you live in the world, there is always a tax consequence. And the other question to all of you is how many would like to pay less taxes? You know, one of the reasons so many people, you know, when I go into retailers throughout the world, somebody says, well, if you pay me cash, you know, I'll give you a discount. The reason they want cash is because they're hiding it from the government. And that's not what Rich Dad supports. We'd rather support financial education so you don't have to be a tax cheat because, you know, you don't want to go to jail. I mean, that's really it. Or get, you know, there's so many penalties. The tax government, you know, the tax services throughout the world come after you because they need their taxes to run their government. So today we're going to be talking about what does tax mean to you. For a little bit, we'll be talking about what happened with the Trump tax cut. What does that mean? But more importantly, what do taxes mean to you? How would you like to pay less taxes and make more money legally? That's really the thing. So once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're about financial education. So for those of you who want to get educated, I don't care where you live in the world, you have to understand the subject called tax. And so our guest today is my personal tax advisor, Tom Wheelwright. He is the author of the book Tax-Free Wealth, the second edition. And he explains why some people pay taxes and why some people don't legally. And as you know, our president, Donald Trump, is really proud that he pays no taxes. Now, if I was sitting in the streets, I'd be more upset about that than how many girlfriends he has. You know, I would want to know how in the world does Trump make millions and billions or whatever he makes and pays no tax? That to me is more interesting than what's going on in the fake news of the world today. So welcome to the program, Tom.
Thanks, Robert. Always good to be on the Rich Dad Show.
Right. It's fantastic, right? So let me ask you this, okay? All throughout the world, tax laws are fundamentally basically the same. The numbers may change a little bit, but fundamentally they're the same. The guys with financial education pay less taxes. Is that correct?
No question, because fundamentally in every country, the tax law is a series of incentives.
Right.
And so those who understand the incentives get to take advantage of the incentives.
And what that means by incentive means if you do what the government wants you to do,
you pay less tax.
Yeah, you give you a tax break. So you're doing the right thing. So listen to this. If you're paying taxes, you're not doing what the government wants you to do.
No, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So think about that for a while. If you're paying taxes, you're not doing what your government wants you to do. So the reason people like President Trump, myself, and many of Tom's clients, you know, the reason they can pay less taxes legally is because they do what the government wants done. For example, I love real estate because, and not my personal residence. I don't get tax breaks for my residence.
Not
but if
much.
I own apartment houses, I get tax breaks. Is that correct?
Yeah. If you're building apartment houses and you're developing apartment houses for other people to live in, the government wants lots of housing available for all the employees who are paying taxes.
Correct.
So that's exactly what they want to do. And because of that, they give you huge tax breaks for that.
So when a parent says to a child, go to school and get a job, is that tax intelligent?
Well, they're basically saying go to school, get a job, and pay 50% of your income to the government.
Yeah. It's not very intelligent. It's, well, my child's got a good high-paying job. Another question is, you know, like everybody wants to win the lottery, or I was watching America's Got Talent, and they're offering $1 million. All these contestants come on the show, and they go, And if you do this, you'll win $1 million. And the whole audience goes nuts. Or somebody says, hey, Joe Schmo just won $1 million in the lottery. And everybody goes nuts. But an intelligent person would ask, well, what percentage tax are they paying? So let's say, Tom, on an American Idol or some kind of game show throughout the world, and I win $1 million. How much in that will I pay taxes? How much of that?
You'll pay about half of it in taxes.
That's not intelligent, is it?
Well, realize you're really on that show for $500,000. You're not on that show for $1 million. So.
But don't you think the same thing?
I do. I'm just going, you know what? It's making money, once you get the financial education, isn't that hard. But then you make all that money and you pay all that tax. Think about these guys, all the risks they're taking on that America's Got Talent, right? They're doing acrobatic, they're playing with fire and saws and everything. And
they go home and they practice 12 hours a day.
Exactly. And then they're going to give half of their winnings to the government. Yeah, I don't think that's too smart.
It's not very intelligent from a tax perspective. And the other thing that happens, Tom, is that we always travel throughout the world. And Tom and I just did a fantastic program for Millennial Money with Alexandra Gonzalez, talking to young people about taxes. But no matter where we go throughout the world, and Tom and I get on stage, and we're on our way to Africa in a few days, and we talk about this is how we pay no taxes. And what does somebody always say to us?
You can't do that here.
Yeah, no matter where we go, somebody always says, you can't do that here. And that's because they're tax ignorant. They went to school, they're probably a doctor or a lawyer and making a lot of money, but they can't do that here. Is that correct?
No, that's right. If they're a professional, if they're, if they've just a high-paid employee, then the reality is they can't do that there.
So all of you, before you shut your brain off and go, well, what you're talking about, you can't do that here, open your brain up, because this is the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're about financial education. We don't recommend you become a tax cheat. Definitely don't do that, because you don't have to do that. But it does require financial education, and that's what the Rich Dad Company stands for. So, Tom, from a big picture of things, why do some people pay more taxes than others? Why do some people like Trump and myself pay almost nothing? Why is that?
Well, it's like you say. The reality is you're a partner with the government whether you like it or not. Right. And you can be a partner where the government automatically takes 40, 50%, 60, 70%. In a lot of countries, it's 70%.
But would you say it's because you're not doing what the government wants you to do?
Well, yeah. Or you can say, I want to be an active partner with the government, follow what the government wants me to do, and then I'll pay fewer taxes. So it really what you look at is when we go to a new country, I'm always looking at, okay, the tax law says, here's the incentives. What that's telling me is this is what the government wants to happen in that country.
So what are some of the incentives in different, generally throughout the world? What are some of the incentives?
Well, so a big one is research and development. So if you engage in new development of new products and new research, whether it's medical or internet-wise or, technology, anything else, every country has big credits, actually much bigger than the U.S. in research and development. Business always has big tax benefits, always. And then real estate, now we have more tax benefits in real estate than any other country, but every country has benefits, particularly if you're building new real estate, because the government wants that to be done.
Right. But if I own a house and it's my personal residence, do I get much of a tax break for that?
In most countries, you get none.
So when some financial expert tells you should buy a house and get out of debt, what would you say?
I'd say, well, that's fine, but that's going to be really expensive.
Yeah, and that's why most people are tax cheats.
I think that's true, is that they don't know what they can do. They don't have the financial education, and they figure the only way I'm going to reduce my taxes is to cheat the government.
Yeah, and this is the really silly thing about it is it seems the government wants us to get rich.
Oh, there's no question.
If we do what the government wants done, which is build apartment houses or do research and development or, we produce food or we produce whatever the government wants, produce jobs, we get tax breaks.
Well, we get tax breaks and we get rich, like you say. The more assets, it ends up that the more assets you have, the less tax you pay.
So all of you out there right now would say, well, you can't do that here. Let me say this much. Tom and I we've been traveling the world for years now. No matter where we go, some mental midget stands up and says, you can't do that here. But the funnier part about it is, Tom, when we were in Moscow, that was the funniest part.
That was hilarious.
Because Tom and I were sitting in Moscow with these very, very successful rich entrepreneurs, and Tom was talking about not paying taxes, and their eyes glazed over. Why did the eyes glaze over?
Because they're not paying taxes, because they look at the tax laws as suggestion.
They said, hey, Tom, we don't pay taxes anyway. Why do we need your services?
Exactly.
So they cheat the government.
They do, and they were very upfront about it. They were very open, and almost without exception, they were cheating the government.
There was only one guy who actually...
Well, the funniest thing is they were all paying some taxes except for one guy, and he was the guy not cheating the government. He was doing it exactly right. He's doing it exactly the way I would have had him do it. And by doing it that way, he paid no taxes. These other guys were paying some and cheating on some.
It's just amazing. And then Tom and I went one year to Kazakhstan, which is an emerging country. It's doing very well. Its economy is booming because they got oil and all those things. They're a very rich country. We spend the whole 2 days explaining to them how to pay less taxes. And what do these two entrepreneurs come up and say to us?
You can't do that here. So that's really nice education. That's really good. It was like 11 o'clock on the last night. And these guys come out and they go, this is really great. Just one problem. You can't do that here.
Why is that, Tom?
It's interesting because I think people have in their minds that what they're doing is right and that what anybody else is doing is wrong. And so, therefore, if you're doing it, it must be wrong. Maybe fine that it's in the U.S., but we can't do it here. I think it's a justification because if you can justify yourself, then you don't have to learn something. You don't have to get the education.
So once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking to Tom Wheelwright, founder and CEO of Wealth Ability. He's a Rich Dad advisor on tax and wealth strategies. He's the author of Tax-Free Wealth, second edition. No matter where you go in the world, you can read his book, Tax-Free Wealth, and that way you can interview other tax advisors. Is that correct?
No, that's for sure. I think that the most important person in your life financially outside of your spouse is going to be your tax advisor because they have such a big impact on your biggest expense.
Yeah, and it's more than an expense. It's an incentive to get rich.
It is. And in fact, it's actually a direction. It's actually a guide on how to get rich. I mean, literally, if you followed what the tax law said, then you would actually get rich because you'd be in real estate, you'd be in the U.S.,
business.
You'd be in oil, you'd be in business, you'd be in agriculture, you'd be in all these endeavors that the government wants to have happen. You pay less tax, make more money.
In America, most of these guys talk about, well, I have a 401k because it's a tax break from the government. Now, every time I hear that, I go, you must be a moron. I don't see the 401k. It's a retirement plan that most employees attempt to get in the States. It's not a very big tax break, is it?
It's not a huge tax break, and it's a lot of control by the government on your savings. I mean, that's really what it is. The government controlling your investment. And you getting no tax breaks other than you might get a deduction for the money you put in. But when you pull the money out, you pay horrendous taxes when you pull the money out.
So that's the problem with the 401k. It's designed for poor people.
It is. Actually, it's designed for you to retire poor.
Yeah. That's why people say, well, when I retire, my income will go down, so I get a tax break. I said, well, that's intelligent.
Yeah, why would you want your income to go down when you retire?
It doesn't make sense to me. But I guess for most people it does.
I guess. I have never met a person that said they wanted to retire poor, but apparently they do. But they're doing it. They're doing it. And in fact, the 401k or RRSP in Canada, the superannuation in Australia, this same plan is around the world. It's just called something different. And the reality is that the whole idea of it is you're in a higher tax bracket now than when you retire. But why would, if you're going to make the same amount of money when you retire, why would you be in a higher tax bracket now? It makes no sense.
Once again, all of you right now who are saying you can't do that here, your mind is closed. That's why there's no financial, that's why your financial education is limited, because what Tom and I are saying right now, the government wants you to be rich, but you got to do what the government wants to have done. That's really it. So coming up, we're going to be talking about President Trump just, passed a new tax code, the first time since 86, I guess.
86.
And 86 was a horrendous change, wasn't it?
It was.
I remember that change.
I was actually in D.C. at the time.
Yeah. So when we come back, we're going to be talking about why Trump is changing the tax code But it's not just about the U.S. Tax codes are changing all over the world right now
For sure.
because they're trying to incentivize different types of people to do certain things. So remember this. This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking about how taxes and the tax code are designed to make you rich. When we come back, we'll find out how you can get richer and pay less taxes.
You're listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Don't be like Charlie. Charlie is that do-it-yourselfer who does himself in. Do-it-yourself is good for tile and grout. It is not good for asset protection. Charlie thought he'd save a few dollars forming his LLC online. With no guidance, he did it wrong. When he sold the property, he lost thousands and thousands of dollars. He did himself in by trying to do it himself. Don't burn yourself. Use Corporate Direct to set up and maintain your LLCs and corporations. Corporate Direct is owned and operated by attorney and Rich Dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Garrett wrote the bestsellers Loopholes of Real Estate and Start Your Own Corporation. He is Robert Kiyosaki's attorney for asset protection. He and his team will do it right. Visit them at corporatedirect.com or call 800-600-1760. Mention Rich Dad and receive $100 off your formation fee. That's corporatedirect.com. corporatedirect.com.
Log on to richdadradio.com while you listen. Now back to Robert Kiyosaki.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news today about taxes. And our guest today is Tom Wheelwright. He's the founder and CEO of Wealth Ability. He is my personal advisor on tax and wealth strategies, but more importantly, how to make more money and pay less in taxes. And he's the author of Tax-Free Wealth, second edition. And by the way, Kim is on holiday out in Maine with her sisters. Otherwise, she would be here today because Tom is one of her favorite persons in the world because, everything you do has a tax consequence.
Everything. Every dollar you spend, every dollar you make.
Right. So before we take any action, we're always checking with Tom, how do we do this, how do we do that? And so all of you out there who hate paying taxes and you're paying taxes, it means you have the wrong tax advisor or you went to the wrong school. And once again, you can listen to the Rich Dad Radio program anytime, anywhere on iTunes or Android. And all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. We archive all of our programs because repetition is one of the best ways to learn. So if you want to pay less taxes, listen to this program again, and new ideas might pop into your head because Tom and I are sick and tired of people saying, well, you can't do that here, when this is what the rich do all over the world. They make a lot of money and pay very little in taxes, sometimes zero. So if you're paying taxes, this is your program. And you can listen to it on this program archived at richdadradio.com, and we archive them for ones if we listen to it again. But get together with friends, family, especially business partners, and listen to this and discuss, because that's how learning takes place. You're not going to sit here and listen to it and it goes in one ear and out the other. So this is your single most important strategy if you want to get rich and pay less taxes. So this is what this program is about. So Tom and I have been talking about this is true all over the world. And no matter where we go, we do all our teaching, and some idiot always comes up, some mental midget comes up and says, well, it's good for the States, but you can't do it here. We do it in the States, and idiots still say you can't do that here. So we're going to talk about who can do it and who can't do it. And it's more specifically about the Trump tax cut, but what it means for the rest of the world, because taxes, I mean, you think your governments are here to smile at you? No, they're here to take your taxes, because without your taxes, they don't operate. So, Tom, explain a little bit about the Trump tax cut. From a big picture to the world, what does it mean? And what does it mean personally to our listeners?
Well, I think the big picture to the world means two things. One is that the U.S. actually is now a bit of a tax haven.
Yeah.
So you want to do business in the U.S., you may actually think about, do you want operations in the U.S. to pay lower taxes so you don't have to pay those high taxes in your country? So I think that's number one. And number two is, I think typically the rest of the world follows what the U.S. does tax-wise. So the U.S., this tax law was big for...
The Trump tax.
The Trump tax bill was big for entrepreneurs, for corporations, and for real estate investors. Those were the three big winners of the Trump tax bill, and there were losers. There were losers. The employees were losers. The professionals, like doctors, lawyers, accountants, were losers. And my experience is that other countries now, Europe is already looking at what do we do to mirror the U.S. because we can't have our jobs going to the U.S.
Well, it's more than the jobs. You see what happens when what U.S. is a tax haven. The euro, the yen, the yuan, the peso flows into the United States, makes the dollar stronger.
And then that's what we've seen. The dollar is extraordinarily strong right now.
Yeah, and it's bad for gold prices, but it's a time I buy more gold and silver when the dollar is strong. But if you're in, let's say, Japan, where the yen is weak, your gold prices go up.
That's right.
It's just one big world. So who are I hate to say this, but in 1986, the specialists, and for those who may have not seen it, it's the cash flow quadrant. E stands for employee, S stands for specialist, small business, self-employed. On the other side of the quadrant, the right side is the big business, 500 employees or more, and I stands for professional investor, not passive investor. But in 86, didn't the doctors and lawyers get screwed too?
Oh, they totally. They got hammered. I mean, real estate also got hammered in 86, but they totally got hammered. Totally. They no longer got to deduct their real estate investment losses.
Yeah, but a professional investor could.
Yeah, that's right.
On the I side, they could.
That's right.
You see, that's why you have to have a guy like Tom. I have him on speed dial because everything I do, it's a tax consequence to it. So what professionals in the U.S. got hammered and they didn't get the tax break? Which ones did not get it? The smart guys. Which smart guys?
Yeah. So the doctors, the lawyers, the accountants, the consultants, the stockbrokers, the athletes, the
movie stars,
the actors, the movie stars. I mean, none of them got the big tax break, which is this 20% deduction. None of them got it.
Who did get it then?
So interestingly enough, Main Street got it. Your routine small business got it. And
so if I own a pizza shop, I got a tax break.
You got it as a pizza shop.
But if I'm a doctor, I got nothing.
Exactly. Architects and engineers got it. So they had the good lobbying. The architects and engineers had the best lobbying.
What's wrong with the accountants? You guys are
we have the worst lobbying in the world. Seriously. It's awful.
And so what was the tax break to employees in the E quadrant?
All they got was a little rate reduction, but they lost a lot of their tax deductions. So they got a standard deduction, which increased. So for some people, they got, that was a big increase.
So they say, guess what? You're getting a deduction. Good news. Bad news? You got less deductions.
That's right. So they got one big new deduction, plus they got a new tax credit for the child, for their children. So those were the two big benefits to the employee, but they lost some of their mortgage interest, they lost some of their state tax deduction, and they lost several other deductions that are gone permanently.
So I want to just say that again, so the pundits get in front of the world and say, guess what, employees? You're getting higher deductions, higher percentage, paying less deduction. What is it?
Less tax.
Less
Lower
tax on
rate.
deductions. But the bad news is you got fewer deductions.
Right.
And one's a state tax law. Now the states must be going crazy.
The states are going crazy. In fact, some states, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, have already made changes to their tax laws to try to get the deduction back by kind of subverting what they did in the federal.
See, what that meant is if I lived in the Communist Republic of Hawaii or California or New York, and I paid $1 million in state taxes, I got some tax break for that or some incentive for that before Trump. And after Trump, what happened?
Now, before that, you got maybe a $500,000 incentive for that $1 million of taxes. Now you got a $5,000 incentive.
Congratulations. Welcome to California. The E's and S's, their tax break was temporary.
It is, and they're actually looking at that right now. As they're going to propose it. I don't think it'll pass, but yeah, their tax break is temporary, where the corporate tax break is permanent.
On the B and I side, it's permanent. You see, ladies and gentlemen, this is why you have to have Tom Wheelwright, tax advisor. Please get his book, Tax Free Wealth, second edition, because of the tax changes coming into the world right now. And remember, you can't do this here because you don't have the right tax advisor. And you can't do this here because you probably went to school and became a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. But you can do this if you own a pizza shop.
That's right.
But it's only temporary. And if you live in certain states, you lost your tax deduction from the state government.
That's right.
And they basically, Trump basically screwed the states.
That didn't vote for him.
So how does the tax code affect there's fake real estate investors. A fake real estate investor is somebody who invests in passively, like through REITs, real estate investment trusts. But how does the tax code affect real estate investors?
Oh, my heavens. The tax benefits for real estate investors are phenomenal. For example, let me give you a simple example. You go buy $1 million building. It's not a big building. You put down $200,000 and the bank puts
in California right now, low-income housing is 1.6.
I saw that.
$1.6 million for a rental property.
$117,000 in your low income
in California.
Yep. It's amazing.
Go to school, get a job, become a doctor, a lawyer, accountant, and you just pay the highest taxes possible.
You do. So at that point, you might want to consider being a professional real estate investor because, look, you buy that $1 million building and it's a rental property, you're going to get as much as $300,000 deduction in the year you buy the building. That's brand new law. That is amazing. When you think about it, you only put $200,000 in. The bank puts in $800,000. You get a $300,000 deduction day one.
Wow. Love that real estate. Just love it, love it, love it, love it. So if I'm a doctor and I form an LLC or something, I can get that tax break, right?
Well,
if I buy real estate.
You'll get it eventually, but you won't get it right away.
Oh, is that right?
Yep.
It's that bad?
It's that bad.
Let's say I'm an employee in California, right? And I want to invest in real estate, which would be crazy in California. Can an employee incorporate in Nevada and then buy real estate from that?
They can, but they still have the same rule. So,
what's that rule?
So the rule is you have to spend more time in real estate than you do at your job.
Oh, you have to be a professional investor.
You still have to be a professional investor. If you're a professional investor, then you're qualified. If you're not a professional investor, it doesn't matter where you are.
So for FYI, for you guys to know this, Kim is qualified as a professional investor.
Correct.
Because she spends a lot of time playing golf and investing in real estate. That's her life.
That's right, and it only takes one of you. I mean, that's the nice thing. Either husband or wife is a professional real estate investor, then you get to count both.
Right. And once again, this is going to be true all over the world. And for those of you right now saying, well, you can't do that here, it's because your mind is a rat trap. You know, really open your mind because it's true all over the world. This is what the rich do. And what the poor and middle class do is they go to school, get a job, or become doctors, lawyers, or accountants, which is nuts. Really, really crazy. But the other thing, too, is we don't recommend you do anything just for taxes. Is that correct?
Never, never, never. You always do it because this makes sense for you economically. It's a good investment or it's a good way for you to spend your time. Do it because you want to do it because it's a seriously good investment. But recognize that every single investment you make has a tax consequence. So you might as well have the best tax consequence possible.
Right. And remember this, if you do what the government wants done, they want you to get rich.
No question.
They don't want you to go to school and get a job and rent and buy a house or invest.
Well,
in
they
stock
penalize
market.
you if they do. That's called taxes.
So please keep your mind open to all that. I just want to repeat this one thing I think is really funny again. So, you know, I said this earlier, but I sit and watch these game shows. I'm going to win $1 million. I want $1 million. Once again, Tom, how much does that winner lose?
50% of it, $500,000.
Is that good tax planning?
Not in my world.
No. So anyway, that's how screwed up our educational system is really, because they don't let people know this. People have their minds closed and they always say, you can't do this here. Anything else you want to say to the public about taxes? How do you prepare? See, it's really about planning, isn't it? You don't just go out and do it.
It really is. It's about, I mean, you have to look at, first question I ask is, where are you going to put your money? I ask the investment question because where you put the money, different tax laws apply to different.
You don't just do it tonight.
No, of course. And you got to look at, am I going to put my money into real estate? I'm going to put it into energy. Am I going to put it in technology? Am I going to put it into business? Because that always has a consequence. But then, you know, the big thing is you've got to sit down with a tax advisor who really understands the law in your country. And there are tax advisors in every country. I mean, we're going to South Africa. There's a tax advisor down there we're going to meet with, and she absolutely understands the law in South Africa, and she's told us before, you can absolutely do it in South Africa.
The reason that was funny, because, you know, Tom and I were teaching at a very prestigious prep school in Grahamstown, and the tax teacher, the accounting teacher she's the only one who didn't get the cash flow game. She was lost. She couldn't do a financial statement, and she teaches accounting.
Very sad.
And so naturally, the financial planner who's an S, who gives financial planning advice to people, and the accounting teacher said, well, you can't do this here in Africa. And thank God we had a person like Tom in the room. She is a CPA licensed in South Africa. And what does she say?
You can do that. Here, I do it all the time.
Yeah. So really, sports fans, if you're paying taxes, you have bad advice. That doesn't mean you go out there and cheat the government and all that, because Tom and I meet at least a year ahead of time because our tax strategies are changing. Money is coming in, money is going out. This year, Kim and I might have a serious problem because we have a problem with too much money and real estate prices are too high. But we're not going to chase real estate just for the tax advantage.
Right.
That would be stupid, wouldn't it?
That would be crazy.
In other words, what I'm saying is just to buy real estate, to not pay taxes when real estate prices at all-time highs is stupid. So Tom, Kim, and I have to get together and we come up with a new strategy for 2019, or actually this year. But
this year, yeah, 2018. We can still, that's the great thing about taxes is every day you've got an opportunity to reduce them.
Yeah. So sports fans, that's why we have Tom Real right here, his Tax-Free Wealth, his second edition, available now. His website is wealthability.com, and Tom is the founder and CEO of Wealthability. He's a Rich Dad advisor on taxes and wealth strategy, and we travel the world. We'll soon be in Africa, and we're going to Australia. Is that correct?
That's right. And Australia, too. We have a CPA in Australia.
Yeah.
Same thing. He gets on stage, says, this is exactly how it works in Australia.
And all these guys, these Australians, I love Australia, I love South Africa. Well, you can't do that here. And it's Candace, right, in South Africa?
It's Candace in South Africa, and then Bruce gets up in Australia, and Bruce goes, well, I do it with my clients here. I don't know why you're not doing it.
And you can hear the brain slip and slide, and their mouth gets soft. And so, well, I have a superannuation, or I have an 401k, or I have an RRSP. And so, yeah, you're being screwed. So once again, thank you, Tom. When we come back, we're going to the next most popular part of our program. It's called Ask Robert. And Tom will stand by to answer any questions you have about your taxes. But remember this, you can do it here.
You're listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Don't be like Charlie. Charlie is that do-it-yourselfer who does himself in. Do-it-yourself is good for tile and grout. It is not good for asset protection. Charlie thought he'd save a few dollars forming his LLC online. With no guidance, he did it wrong. When he sold the property, he lost thousands and thousands of dollars. He did himself in by trying to do it himself. Don't burn yourself. Use Corporate Direct to set up and maintain your LLCs and corporations. Corporate Direct is owned and operated by attorney and Rich Dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Garrett wrote the bestsellers Loopholes of Real Estate and Start Your Own Corporation. He is Robert Kiyosaki's attorney for asset protection. He and his team will do it right. Visit them at corporatedirect.com or call 800-600-1760. Mention Rich Dad and receive $100 off your formation fee. That's corporatedirect.com. corporatedirect.com.
It pays to listen. Now back to Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad Radio Show.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. Today we're talking to Tom Wheelwright. He's the founder and CEO of Wealthability. He's a Rich Dad advisor on tax and wealth strategy. He's the author of Tax-Free Wealth, second edition, because things have changed since the first edition. And for those who want to pay less taxes, then I would get Tom's book, Tax-Free Wealth. It's a lot less than talking to an accountant who may not know anything, because there's rich accountants and poor accountants. There's good accountants and flake jobs out there. But the most important thing here is this, is the tax law is basically the same all over the world. And for Tom and I and Kim, we got all upset because no matter where we go, we talk about how we make a lot of money, pay nothing in tax, and not little in taxes. They always say you can't do that here. And it's because they're ignorant. They're just financially ignorant. So if you're paying taxes, it just means you're ignorant. You have some kind of fear of being audited, which is ridiculous, because if you're rich, you always get audited. And then, or you're afraid, you think that paying taxes is patriotic. When you look at America, America was born as a tax-free nation. 1773 was the Boston Tea Party, which is a tax revolt. So once again, you can listen to the Rich Dad radio program anytime, anywhere on Android or iTunes, and we archive all of our programs at richdadradio.com. We archive them at richdadradio.com because if you listen to this program again, you'll learn even more, but more importantly, get friends, family, and especially business associates to discuss taxes. Why would you sit there and just pay more and more in taxes and work harder and harder and harder and pay more and more in taxes? Well, the federal government and the central banks are printing more and more money, so you have to work harder and harder so you make more money. Well, I got a pay raise, but then you pay a higher percentage in taxes. That is nuts. That is nuts. And think, well, you can't do that here. Well, that means you're ignorant. That's all it means, okay? Taxes are your single largest expense over your lifetime. Wake up. Get Tom's book, Tax-Free Wealth. So, Melissa, what's our first question for Ask Robert? And you can submit your questions to AskRobert@RichDadRadio.com.
Robert, our first question today comes from Judy in Dallas, Texas. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. She says, I have 4 rental houses plus my home and some raw land. Under the new Trump tax laws, can I still write off the property tax? They are not in an LLC. I used to bunch my taxes and pay property taxes on my home and land twice in even years and take the standard deduction in odd years. Am I not able to do this in 2018?
Well, congratulations first on having a rental property. I mean, that is very, very smart. Second is congratulations for asking when Tom's on the radio show. Because if Kim and I were on this radio show, you'd be talking to 2 idiots here. And no, but I'm not kidding. I meet so many people. So, well, who gave you tax advice? Oh, my brother-in-law. Is he an accountant?
Oh,
No. He's a doctor. I said, well, what would a doctor know about taxes? Because they pay the highest taxes. You know, so sports fans, lesson number 1 from Rich Dad Radio. Ask somebody who knows what they're talking about. And again, not all accountants know what they're talking about. So there's accountants for idiots and accountants for rich guys. Tom, what's the answer to her question?
Well, so the answer is with respect to the real estate that is rented, okay, the rental real estate, those deductions didn't change. So I'm glad we got this question because people think, well, we're not getting our property taxes deductible anymore. Well, that's true for your personal property taxes. They're limited, okay? So on your personal residence and your land, your investment land, they're going to be limited. But on your rental properties, they're not limited. There's no limit on your deduction for property taxes on your rental properties. So that's very important. And it doesn't matter. They're deductible whether they're in an LLC or not. Now, I would recommend Garrett Sutton's book, Real Estate Loopholes, to talk about how to put that into an LLC because he's going to say, you know what, you're missing out on asset protection there.
That's another big point is that when you're doing taxes, there's the law side and then there's the accounting side.
That's right.
So Garrett's book on real estate loopholes is from the legal side, the law side, and Tom is on the accounting side. So it's always a team sport, but that's a very, very good question. Again, this is true all over the world. So every time I meet these young people, I'm going to buy a house because it's an asset. I said, no, it's not. I mean, give me a break, you know. I mean, if you look at cash flow, you're going to send it to the bank, and you're not getting any tax breaks from it. It's really, really bad advice these young people are coming out of school with. So that's why I'll plug. We have Millennial Money. It's all these lessons, and it's Alexandra Gonzalez, who's 21 years old, and she's asking questions for all your millennials that they don't teach you in school. So very important program, Millennial Money at richdad.com. Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Elijah in Washington, D.C. Favorite book, Cashflow Quadrant. So what are the biggest differences in terms of taxation between an S-Corp and an LLC?
Now, that's a question that also needs Garrett's bridge on it, but Tom understands it. But the point here is always ask a tax accountant and a tax attorney because that's how you get the more complete picture.
Well, so here's the most important thing is that the distinction between, like you were saying, there's the state law and then there's the tax law. They're different. So a limited liability company, that's a state law question. That's a Garrett question. But an S corporation, that's a tax law. Now, here's the thing. A limited liability company can be taxed as an S corporation. So when you tell me that it's a limited liability company, I don't know what that means from a tax standpoint because that's a legal distinction, not a tax distinction. So if you're saying, well, if I have a limited liability company that's taxed as a partnership, How is that different from an S corporation? And primarily the difference is that you're going to pay higher Social Security taxes if your tax is a partnership than if your tax is an S corporation.
And this is why you want professional advice who knows what they're talking about. Another thing, Tom, when you go to the legal side, there's this new movement on calling family limited partnerships or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, they've been around for years and years and years.
Is that any good at all?
Yeah, well, family limited partnerships are used primarily for estate planning, and they're great for estate planning, and sometimes they can be important for income tax planning too. We use all entities depending on the person, so it's really your situation is different from anybody else's.
And the reason I bring this up, there's no way your brother-in-law, who's an idiot, knows
No
any
way.
of this stuff. And they're going to give you their advice from the best they know, even though they're idiots. So lesson number one from Rich Dad Radio Show, don't listen to idiots. You'll be much better off. And most people, all they know is to go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, invest in the stock market, and pay taxes. And that's not smart. What do you say to people about taxes are patriotic?
Well, paying the amount of tax that you have to pay is absolutely patriotic. Just you don't have to pay as much as you think you do if you understand the law. I actually say, look, you're more patriotic to do what the government wants you to do than to not do what the government wants you to do. And if you do what the government wants you to do, you pay less tax. So to me, you're going to end up being more patriotic if you legally pay less tax.
So if I buy a stock, I buy Exxon stock, do I get a tax break for that?
Not right off the bat, no.
No, but if I invest in an oil drilling operation,
immediate deduction.
So I put $1 million into an oil project, a real entrepreneurial drilling project. What's my tax break for $1 million into an oil drilling project versus $1 million into Exxon?
So you put $1 million in Exxon and you're going to get no immediate tax break. If you put $1 million into an oil drilling project, you're going to get a tax benefit this year of at least $400,000.
So that's an ROI, right? Return on investment.
Yeah, 40% right off the bat. The government is sharing the investment. They're saying, we'll take 40% of the risk, you take 60% of the risk.
So that's what financial education is about, and that's why we listen to the Rich Dad Radio Show. And you don't have to be a tax cheat, which is
right.
Those guys in Moscow were entertaining, weren't they? They said,
they're pretty funny.
Yeah, they were really funny. They said, yeah, we don't need your advice because we don't pay taxes anyway. I thought, I think that's ridiculous, but that's their culture.
Hey, it was awesome. Our buddy who said, well, laws are just suggestions anyways.
I know. They don't follow them. Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Ellen in Australia. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. When you are no longer a tax resident of your country of citizenship, but are not yet a tax resident of any other country, where would you suggest setting up tax residency, taking into account the changes in tax treaties and intergovernmental reporting?
Well, that's another question you have a tax professional, right?
Well, it is, but it goes to your point earlier, Robert, that you don't do things for tax reasons.
Correct.
Right. Do it for where do you want, I'd say, where do you want to live? Where do you want to be, and start there. And then if you have some choices, you say, well, it's equal between the United States and, Cayman Islands. And you go, okay, well, Cayman Islands may be better because there's no tax in the Cayman Islands. So, you can look at it that way.
And
but
you can vacation in Australia.
There you go. But never let the tax tail wag the dog is what we say. And Robert, you're also right, is that's actually a very sophisticated question. So congratulations on the question. That's a very sophisticated question. Very few people understand that you could be without a tax home. And that's where you're really going to need to sit down with an international tax advisor who really understands how to work with the different countries.
So once again, Tom and I are on our way right now to Africa. But when we go on stage in South Africa, we have a local tax authority there.
That's right.
To verify what we say. And then we're going to Australia, and we have a local tax authority there. Been working together for years. And and somebody always stands up and says, you can't do that here. And what does our tax authority in South Africa and Australia say?
They say, well, we do it here, and we do it here with our clients all the time, so I don't know what your problem is.
And I think really that's the lesson or the message from this Rich Dad radio program. You can do it there, but you have to do what the government wants you to do. And in my case, we provide jobs, we have apartment houses, we invest in oil. That's the big difference. There's a lot of other tax breaks you can do. We can do research and development, but that you have to have a great tax advisor and start early. You don't just do tax planning on April 15th when your taxes are due.
That's right.
And that's what most idiots do. Okay. So once again, thank you, Tom. Always great to have you on the program.
Always good to be here.
Glad President Trump is incentivizing entrepreneurs on the B and the I side and kind of taking it to the E and the S side, but that's the tax law. Once again, you can submit your questions to Ask Robert at richdadradio.com. And thank you all for listening to the Rich Dad Radio Show.
mẹ ru con hiu hiu trẻ mùa lụt nước